Ever felt like a decision you made at work, maybe a seemingly small one, had a ripple effect much larger than you expected?
Mm.
Or perhaps you've been in a project where it felt like different groups were pulling in completely opposite directions?
Oh, definitely. That feeling is pretty common, I think.
Well, today, we're going to unearth the hidden forces behind those dynamics as we dive deep into the world of business stakeholders.
Yeah, we're going to try and get beyond the jargon, you know, really clarify exactly who stakeholders are, what truly motivates them.
And why understanding them is so important.
Exactly. Why it's crucial, not just for, say, running a global corporation, but honestly, for succeeding in any team project or really any big undertaking.
And we're definitely going to tackle one of the most common stumbling blocks head on. That big question: are stakeholders and shareholders the same thing?
Ah, yes, the classic confusion.
Spoiler alert, they're absolutely not.
Yeah.
And we'll show you why that difference matters, maybe more than you think.
hmm Our mission in this deep dive, really, is to give you a kind of powerful mental model, a shortcut maybe,
Okay.
to see these intricate business relationships with, let's say, X-ray vision, empowering you to move through the professional world with greater clarity, foresight.
And a much sharper sense of who you actually need to talk to.
Precisely.
Hmm.
Who you truly need to engage.
So let's dig in then. We hear this term stakeholder thrown around quite a lot these days. But what does it really, boil down to?
Yeah, what is it? At its most fundamental level, a stakeholder is anyone with a vested interest in, or someone who can be affected by a business's actions or outcomes.
Okay, so vested interest is key there.
Absolutely. And that's a really broad definition, covers individuals, groups, even other organizations.
And it seems like this concept has gained a lot more traction recently, become more vital for leaders.
It really has. And what's fascinating, I think, is the word's origin. Way back in the 1700s, a stakeholder was literally the person holding the money, the stakes, in a bet.
Holding the bet money.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So while the business meaning has evolved quite a bit, that core idea of having something significant on the line, an invested interest, that remains the absolute heart of it.
That's a great historical context. So it's not just some new management buzzword. It has real roots.
Deep roots, yeah.
And speaking of broad versus specific, before we go any further, we absolutely have to clear up that classic confusion. Stakeholders versus shareholders, they sound so alike.
They really do. It's probably the number one mix-up.
Yeah.
But getting it right is critical for any leader.
So break it down for us.
Okay. A shareholder is a very specific type of stakeholder. It's someone who owns a piece of the business, literally owns stock they've bought in, seeking a financial return.
Right, they own shares, equity.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But here's the crucial point.
Hmm.
Not all stakeholders are shareholders. That category is much, much bigger.
So basically, a shareholder is a stakeholder,
Yes,
but a stakeholder is not necessarily a shareholder.
you got it. That's the fundamental distinction.
And that simple difference highlights how much broader the stakeholder idea really is. If you're only thinking shareholders, you're missing, well, potentially a lot.
A huge part of the picture, often the most critical parts, actually. It's a much wider ecosystem.
Okay, ecosystem, I like that. So how do we start mapping this ecosystem?
Well, a common way to categorize them is internal versus external stakeholders.
Like an inner circle and then the wider community.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Internal stakeholders are the individuals or groups operating within the business structure itself.
Okay, like who?
Well, first up, you've got the owners and shareholders. We just talked about them. Their main interest, usually profitability, growth, the success that directly impacts their return on investment, their dividends.
And they influence things how voting.
Voting on key decisions, electing directors, that sort of thing. Think about shareholders of a big supermarket chain like Tesco in the UK or maybe Walmart in the US. They want growth so their investment pays off.
Got it. Who else is inside?
Then you have employees. Obviously, they care about job security, fair wages.
The basic.
Basics, yeah. But also good working conditions, opportunities to develop, a positive environment. Their influence comes from their skills, their effort, their productivity, motivated staff, big boost to customer service, sales.
And the flip side.
The flip side is low morale, maybe strikes, like we saw with Royal Mail workers striking over pay and conditions in the UK. That can severely impact operations, reputation, everything.
Huge impact. So owners, employees, who else in the inner circle?
Managers. They're often kind of caught in the middle, aren't they?
Yeah, seems like it.
They're responsible for running the business day to day, hitting objectives, Their interests,
Yeah.
often tied to things like performance bonuses, career progression, team success.
And they influence through, well, managing.
Pretty much. Through their decisions, implementing strategies, setting goals, deciding where resources go. A store manager changing layouts to improve efficiency or cutting costs somewhere. That's direct influence.
Okay, so that's the internal crew. Owner shareholders, employees, managers. Now, what about the external players? Those outside the building, but still connected.
Right, the external stakeholders. People or groups outside the business, but still significantly affected by what it does. Or who can affect it.
Then who comes first there?
You could argue customers are often paramount. Their main interest is pretty straightforward. Quality products or services, fair prices, availability.
And their influence is their wallet?
Their wallet, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also their voice. Reviews, word of mouth, boycotts. They can really push companies. Think about customers demanding eco-friendly packaging, forcing retailers to change.
Yeah, that's definitely happened.
Or remember the horse meat scandal in the UK, where that lasagna wasn't beef.
Oh, I remember that. Big deal.
Huge deal. Boycotts basically destroyed that brand in the UK. That's serious customer power.
Wow. Okay, so customers are huge. Who else is external?
Suppliers, the ones providing the goods or services the business needs, their interest, getting paid on time, stable contracts, fair deals.
And the impact.
They can have a massive impact. If they raise prices suddenly or delay deliveries, that can disrupt everything. Think of a local farmer supplying milk to a big grocery chain. That relationship is vital for the farmer's income, but also for the chain's supply.
Makes sense. Then there's the big one, government.
Yep. All levels, usually local, state, national. They're interested in businesses following the law, paying taxes, creating jobs.
And they influence through rules and taxes.
Regulations, taxes, policies, grants, all sorts of levers, like governments ensuring fair employment practices at large companies or setting minimum wage laws. That directly hits a company's costs.
Right.
Plus, successful businesses mean more tax income for the government, maybe less spent on benefits. They have a stake in business success, too.
Interesting. It's not just an adversarial relationship, then. What about the folks living nearby?
Good one. Local communities, they care a lot about how a business affects their area. Jobs are good, but what about pollution? Traffic? Noise?
Yeah, the NMBY effect. Not in my backyard.
Exactly. They can support a business, or they can protest, campaign, put pressure on local councils.
Yeah.
Really influence whether a project goes ahead or how it operates.
Okay. Anyone else?
We also see pressure groups playing a big role. Groups focused on specific issues, environmental, social, animal rights.
Like activists pushing cosmetic companies on animal testing.
Precisely that. They aim to influence business decisions to align with their cause. And then, don't forget others like the media shaping public perception or accreditation bodies setting industry standards.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you list them all out, like that internal, external, owners, employees, customers, suppliers, government, communities, pressure groups, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
And it becomes crystal clear that every single one of these groups has its own agenda, its own expectations, its own way of impacting the business. It's not just a list. It's like a web of interconnected interests.
A web is a perfect description.
Yeah.
And this is where the complexity really hits, right? And the challenge for leaders, because those interests often clash.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, think about it. Shareholders want maximum profit, long-term growth. That often means keeping costs down, including wages.
Okay.
But employees, they want better pay, job security, good benefits, which cost the company more.
Right. Direct conflict there, potentially.
Exactly. Or customers wanting low prices and high quality, while suppliers want to charge fair prices for their goods to meet their profit. These objectives are often pulling in opposite directions.
This is where it gets really, really interesting. Let's use a concrete example. Imagine a big fast food chain, maybe like McDonald's, facing that fight for 15 pounds or a similar campaign for a big wage hike. How does a decision like actually raising wages significantly ripple through all those stakeholders we just listed? It's not just about happy employees, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. It's a cascade. Okay, so McDonald's raises wages significantly. What happens? For shareholders, higher labor costs probably mean lower profits, right?
Yeah, bottom line takes a hit.
Which could mean the share price drops, dividends get cut. They might not be happy.
Okay, what about managers?
Managers. Well, maybe their salaries go up too, to keep pace. Or maybe they get intense pressure to find savings elsewhere, cut staff hours, automate more.
Squeeze somewhere else.
Right. For customers, it could mean higher prices on the menu. Or if the company tries to absorb the cost, maybe quality dips slightly, smaller portions, something like that to protect margins.
So the cost gets passed on one way or another. Suppliers.
Suppliers could face tougher negotiations. McDonald's might say, look, our labor cost just went up. We need a better price from you. Or they might even switch suppliers to find cheaper options.
Okay, so mostly negative ripples so far for those groups. What about the positives?
Well, obviously, for the employees getting the raise, it means more financial stability, maybe better morale, lower turnover, hopefully.
And the local communities.
Those communities where the employees live and spend their money, they get an economic boost.
Yeah.
More disposable income circulating.
Good point.
Pressure groups who advocated for the raise see it as a huge win. Vindicates their efforts.
And the government.
Government gets more income tax revenue from the higher wages. And maybe, potentially, fewer people needing benefits, which saves public money. So you see, it's complex. Good for some, challenging for others.
A real balancing act. And it's not just the business affecting stakeholders, right? You said it's a two-way street. Stakeholders hit back.
Oh, absolutely. The influence flows powerfully in both directions. That's critical to grasp.
How so?
Well, take shareholders. They provide the capital. If they don't like the direction the company's going, they can sell their shares. A big sell-off can wipe billions off the company's value.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Ouch. Okay, employees.
Employees, collectively they can strike, like we mentioned, or even just widespread low morale leads to lower productivity, worse service that hits sales hard.
And customers. We saw the horse meat example.
Exactly. Customers vote with their feet and their wallets. They stop buying, they tell their friends, they post bad reviews online. That negative word of mouth can be fatal for a business.
So their buying power and their voice both matter immensely.
Definitely. And suppliers. They can refuse to supply essential stuff or hike prices. Either way, it can grind your operations to a halt.
Okay. Communities and pressure groups.
Local communities and pressure groups can organize protests, boycotts, PR campaigns,
Yeah.
things that really damage a company's reputation. It's social license to operate. Makes it hard to do business.
And finally, the government hammer.
And finally, governments. They can pass laws, impose fines, change regulations, environmental standards, labor laws, competition rules. These can have massive financial and operational consequences. It really shows businesses don't operate in a vacuum. They can't afford to ignore these forces.
Yeah, when you lay it all out, all these different goals, all these ways they can influence each other, it's honestly no wonder that conflict is almost baked into the system.
It really is. Conflict seems almost inevitable sometimes.
It must feel like navigating a minefield for leaders.
It can feel that way. Stakeholder conflict just happens when the interests of these different groups fundamentally clash.
Like the wage example.
Exactly. The McDonald's wage scenario is perfect. Employees wanting that £50 an hour for stability clashes directly with shareholders wanting maximum profit, which often means keeping wages lower. You can't fully satisfy both at the exact same time.
Another classic one must be employees wanting higher wages versus customers wanting prices to stay low or even drop.
That's a constant tension, absolutely. It really is a tightrope walk.
So how do the best leaders handle this? How do you navigate this constant push and pull?
Well, there's no magic bullet, obviously.
Yeah.
But effective management usually involves navigating these conflicts with sensitivity and a strategic approach. Meaning things like proactive communication, really listening to stakeholders, understanding their concerns, seeking compromises, finding common ground where possible.
Not just dictating from the top.
Definitely not. And increasingly, it involves what's called corporate social responsibility, CSR.
Right, CSR, we hear that a lot. What does it mean in practice here?
It means businesses taking actions to operate ethically, contribute positively to society, consider their environmental impact, trying to balance different needs. You know, Marks and Spencer's Plan A in the UK is a well-known example, aiming to tackle environmental and social issues alongside business goals.
So it's about showing you care about more than just profit.
In a way, yes. And finding solutions where maybe nobody gets everything they want, but everyone gets something they can live with. Like maybe you raise wages to £10 now, but commit to a plan to get to £15 over 5 years. It's about finding that workable balance, that compromise.
Okay, this is all making sense, but let's bring it back to the listener. Why should you, maybe someone listening who's an emerging leader or just trying to navigate their career, why should you care deeply about all this stakeholder stuff?
Yeah, this isn't just theory for textbooks, is it?
No, it feels very real world. It seems like a practical playbook for actually succeeding.
It is, and that raises the key question. How does understanding stakeholders actually make you a better leader? How does it improve your decisions?
Well, for one thing, it clearly forces you to think beyond just the immediate financial numbers, the bottom line.
Exactly. It breaks you out of just thinking about making money for the shareholders. That's a very narrow view these days.
So what's the alternative view?
Adopting this stakeholder perspective means you see your organization as a system, a network. You're constantly exchanging value with all these different groups. And if you neglect some of those groups, if you don't manage those relationships, it can seriously cost you.
Like that restaurant example you mentioned.
Yeah, the restaurant that fell out with its main drink supplier couldn't sell Budweiser anymore. That hurt their customers, hurt their reputation, hurt their business. It shows the limits of just managing for the bottom line. You can't afford to alienate key players in your ecosystem.
Okay, so broader thinking. What else?
Second, it means you have to, well, play a bigger game as a leader.
What do you mean by that?
It's not just about hierarchy anymore, about telling people what to do, engaging effectively with all these stakeholders. It demands higher level skills.
Like what?
Collaboration, negotiation, building trust, really understanding that mutual exchange of value.
Yeah.
You can't just order your suppliers or your local community around. You need to influence, engage, persuade. It's less command and control, more orchestration.
Orchestration. I like that. So, thinking broader, playing a bigger game, is there a practical first step someone could take?
Absolutely. A really powerful practical step is to actually do a stakeholder analysis.
Sounds a bit corporate jargony.
It can sound that way, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Seriously, grab a pen and paper or open a notes app. List out all the potential stakeholders you can think of for your organization or even just for a specific project you're working on.
Okay, just brainstorm everyone involved or affected.
Exactly. Then, for each one, ask yourself, what do they need or want from us? What's their interest? And crucially, how can we start to exchange value in a way that benefits both sides?
So mapping out the give and take.
Precisely.
Oh,
And you'll also want to think about primary versus secondary stakeholders.
what's the difference there?
Primary stakeholders are the ones who absolutely must be involved, consulted from start to finish for major decisions. Their input is critical. Secondary stakeholders are important too, but maybe their involvement is more specific to certain phases or aspects of a project.
And who falls into which category depends entirely on the situation.
Wildly. The primary stakeholders for, say, the FBI are going to be vastly different from the primary stakeholders for the Boston Celtics basketball team or for your local corner bakery. It's totally context dependent.
Right. Wow. Okay. We have covered a ton of ground today.
I really am.
But it feels clear now that understanding stakeholders isn't just, an academic thing. It really is a roadmap to making businesses more resilient, more successful in the long run.
Yeah, it paints a much richer, more accurate picture of how organizations actually work, doesn't it?
It does.
And if you connect it all up, recognizing all those diverse interests, all those lines of influence, internal, external, that's what lets businesses build stronger relationships. It helps them anticipate and avoid costly conflicts. And ultimately, it helps them thrive in what are, let's face it, increasingly complex and competitive markets.
So it's about more than just profit.
It really is. It's about creating sustainable value that benefits everyone who has a stake in the enterprise, not just the shareholders.
It's seeing the whole ecosystem, like you said, seeing the connections, not just the individual parts.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this depth dive, what's the main thing you hope people take away? What stands out to you?
Well, I think it leads to an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. Think about your own work, or maybe even relationships in your daily life. How might adopting this stakeholder lens, thinking about all the people affected or involved, how might that change the way you approach making decisions? Or even just interacting with people? What value do you see, personally, in considering the broader interests of those around you? Going beyond just the most obvious people, or the ones with the clearest financial stake. Something to think about.